Hello and welcome to the Sportskeeda football show, where we look back at all the weekend's action and discuss all the latest ongoings in the Barclays Premier League. I'm Shane Burns and I'm joined by Tom Scholes.
Hello.
I'm also joined by Sam Cox.
Hiya.
And also Arjun.
Hey.
Hey guys, no better place to start than at what happened at Stamford Bridge on Saturday. Chelsea ran out comprehensive winners in the end, but Sam, what was your opinion on Antonio Conte's team selection for starters?
It was pretty much as expected, even though he had Willian in midweek, which I thought was surprising against Liverpool. I thought it was inevitable Pedro was going to play. Naturally, a lot of Chelsea fans wanted Fabregas to come in, but I didn't really see that happening, to be honest. If Chelsea needed to win, they might have done, but basically just avoiding defeat in the games against Arsenal and Liverpool would have been brilliant. And as far as I think it's pretty much over now. Chelsea don't look like collapsing, and none of the teams look quite good enough to put enough wins together to get anywhere near them, actually.
So you feel that the way Conte set up was absolutely did it fall perfectly into the hands of Arsenal? Well, actually, I counter that. Was it ideally suited to basically demolish Arsenal?
Yeah, and I think Wenger, it was not so much about what Conte did, because that was kind of inevitable, but it was the fact that Wenger didn't do anything. Wenger had his team set up, and then obviously once they went behind early on, they had Coquelin in midfield who didn't seem to hold his position in front of the defence enough, and they ended up pushing both fullbacks up the pitch all the time, which meant that Chelsea, every time they got the ball, had at least 3-on-3. Sometimes they had a 3-on-2 counter-attack. And Arsenal could have quite easily gone, so they could have been 3 or 4 down at half time with a couple of decent passes from Costa and Pedro.
Tom, I'm going to throw that over to you. Wenger was obviously in the stands. He would have picked the team. But do you feel like the team selection Chelsea went out with, it was inevitable what was going to occur?
Well, it's been a common theme throughout the season. You know, Conte has picked more or less the same team in the same formation ever since, ironically, when Arsenal beat them. So Wenger went into this, and his coaching staff and the players pretty much knew how they were going to line up. I don't feel he did anything to change it. He went with his game plan, and it backfired. Coquelin was run ragged in the midfield. He just couldn't do it. Oxlade-Chamberlain next to him. You know, a lot of people are fans of Oxlade-Chamberlain, but I'm hard-pressed to find anyone that would like him in the central midfield position, especially when you're trying to combat Kante and Matic. But Wenger just did not seem to change anything, even during the game.
You mentioned about Oxlade-Chamberlain being in the central midfield role. Do you feel that that's where the difference was, especially when you compare Kante and Matic to Arsenal's, I would say, midfield, but it wasn't. It was a makeshift midfield.
And I think that's it in a nutshell. Kante and Matic have been playing together pretty much all season. They know how each other works. So putting them two up against Oxlade-Chamberlain and Coquelin, easy pickings for him. Every time one of the Arsenal midfielders got the ball, bang, Kante was there. It was like there was 3 of him on the pitch, and nobody could stop him, and no one could deal with him.
However good Chelsea's midfield was, let's just say there was a degree of uncertainty around the first Chelsea goal. It was quite controversial. Arjun, what do you make of Alonso's goal? Do you feel that it should have stood, or do you feel it should have been disallowed, especially figuring Hector Bellerin was practically knocked out?
I think Conte summed it up perfectly. He said that maybe anywhere else it's probably a foul, but in England it's a goal, and I think that Alonso was just too aggressive, which is perfectly fine. He showed more desire, not just him, the entire Chelsea team. They were all over the pitch, and they were fighting. They were showing a lot of passion, grinta, and that's something that Conte instills in them: a fighting spirit to win every battle, every tackle, every game. And I think that goal pretty much summed up what Conte is all about.
Okay, it might have summed up what Conte is all about, but surely an elbow into the face of an opposing player should not be allowed. Basically,
it's probably I can understand that it's a little dangerous, but I think in England you've seen those, you've seen people get away with it. So I think it's fair to say that Chelsea merited the goal.
I'm gonna be a little bit controversial here. You might say that they merited the goal, but like, Sam, surely you can see where a lot of fans are coming from by the fact a player was physically knocked out in the challenge. Now it's not as if he was knocked out when it was a foot that is, or an accidental head collision. It was an elbow into the face. What do you think? Do you think the goal should have stood? Do you think it set the tone for the rest of the game, or?
I mean, if Arsenal are a team who, like, I mean, since the past like 5 or 10 years, they've been like this, where they've allowed single incidents to change the course of the whole game or the season, in fact. So I mean, that speaks volumes about the attitude of the team, and I think that if this goal impacted them so much that they couldn't get back in, that shows that they can't fight for major honors.
I absolutely agree with you there, but Sam, do you agree with Arjun, especially when he says that it's almost a mentality thing? Because when you see Eden Hazard being given so much space in midfield and practically he literally walked the ball into the net with about 6 of them trailing behind him watching him. Do you feel that it is a mental thing with Arsenal?
I think it's a bit. Well, there's definitely a psychological problem Arsenal have, particularly in the biggest games, it seems. But when it came to that goal, it's that is a foul anywhere on the pitch, I think, because it's an easy decision to give. But having been taller than everyone I've played against when I played football as well, you tend to, when he didn't jump unnaturally, it's a horrible incident. Like you sort of want to see fouls given when someone's knocked out like Bellerin was. But it's part that I don't know what else Alonso could do. You don't want to have things where people are getting away with forearm smashing someone like that, because it's just unpleasant, and particularly after the Ryan Mason incident the other week. But I have a lot of sympathy with what Alonso was doing. He just out-jumped him and he was a bigger guy. It's a bit unfair to call it symbolic of Arsenal, because that was just Bellerin being small. I thought what was more symbolic of Arsenal was the fact that Bellerin ended up in the air against Chelsea's striker and then against Alonso because Koscielny had been dragged out to the wing. That sort of defensive mess was more Arsenal for me.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing, because even Walcott didn't track Alonso back. So I mean, Walcott's not that physically built, but still, if he had at least tracked him back, maybe Alonso wouldn't have been that free to get a free header.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair, definitely.
So Tom, do you agree with basically what the two guys are saying, that it's practically the same old Arsenal? When when experienced players like Petr Cech and Lauren Koscielny are making like Cech for the third goal and Lauren Koscielny for the first goal, like Arjun said, they're basic defending mistakes. That's what's going to win or basically cost you a league title. Do you feel that it is the same old Arsenal, regardless how many experienced and quality players that they have?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same old Arsenal. They've gone to Chelsea and they've seemed to have given up. Now, I'm not going to say they didn't try, because you can't accuse players of not trying. But after that first goal went in, and especially after Gabriel, Courtois saved from Gabriel as opposed to Gabriel missed, there was an air of not again from some of the Arsenal players. The energy from players like Sanchez just wasn't there. And I think I might be wrong in saying this, but did Koscielny come out and say something about the team selection today, that Wenger got it wrong?
I'm not sure if that was a misquote from some publications or not. I saw that headline, but I'm always wary of that sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, because I saw something about he questioned the team selection, but I don't remember much about it. So, to go back onto what you said, yeah, I think it is same old Arsenal, because a lot of the fans as well went in with a let's try not to, get battered mentality.
Right, look, I'm not going to go into the Koscielny thing because again myself I haven't read too much into it, and it could be basically a misquote. But going slightly into it, if I can, There was a second half, Arsenal 2-0 down. Why on earth does Wenger bring on Danny Welbeck instead of Olivier Giroud? What the hell has Giroud got to do to remain in this team? Or at least get his chance? Tom, I'm going to throw that one back to you.
Beats me. If you go back to, I'd love to give you an explanation, because we were talking about it. Some people I chat football with, and we were saying, what is the one weakness in the Chelsea defence? Well, if you're going to find one, you go back to when Tottenham beat them at White Hart Lane. How did they beat them?
Airily.
Two deep crosses to the back, and it wasn't like it was Toby Alderweireld with the header. It was Dele Alli.
Exactly,
So,
but also as well, you look at that. Where what did Giroud end up scoring from? It was
Exactly.
90 seconds on time isn't good enough. It should have been about to 90 minutes beforehand, because he should have started the game. Sam, you must have been. A lot of Chelsea fans must have been pretty happy when they see players like Danny Welbeck coming on, who is the same strike ratio as Toby Alderweireld in the Premier League over the last 4 or 5 years.
I not starting Giroud was kind of, it was the most Wenger thing. It was just like he decided how he was going to play against Chelsea almost 6 months ago. You look, it wasn't just Tottenham, it was Stoke who actually scored against Chelsea a couple of times, which not many teams have done. Maybe they scored once, but Crouch was the one who dominated them again. The one thing this Chelsea side is slightly vulnerable to is the aerial ball. And Arsenal have a guy who can win the ball in the air, and they didn't start him at Stamford Bridge in a game they had to win. It was completely idiotic not to start him. It did not make any sense. And particularly, Aspilicueta is a brilliant defender if you keep the ball on the floor. That's why he was pretty much the best fullback in the league for a while, and he's been brilliant this season. But one thing he's not is going to win the ball in the air. I didn't understand that. I thought that was kind of suicide before the game had started from Arsenal.
Arjun, you know Conte quite well. You follow Juventus quite deeply and quite passionately, as many people who follow you on Twitter will know. Did you see this as? Did you fear that this Conte side was going to lose to an Arsene Wenger side, especially figuring his weak mentality, stupid tactics by not playing Olivier Giroud when Chelsea's defence is so small? Surely this is something that Conte must have gone in and nearly laughed at.
I think I could be a little premature, but I thought the league was done maybe in December when they beat Man City, because this is a typical Conte side where once they take the lead, they just don't let others come in. So the best chance that you have against a Conte team is that you beat them to maybe a game or an objective quicker than Conte does, because otherwise, he's just going to steamroll the league. I mean, we're speaking about a guy that he won 102 points in the Serie A. I mean, that's quite crazy. And the other thing is Conte's mentor, Trapattoni, was the former Irish manager.
I know, yeah.
And Conte follows him, he's had a huge influence on Conte. And Trapattoni always stresses on minute details that win you the game.
What also, being Irish as well, what I also know about Trapattoni is that when he was with Ireland, no matter how good a player was playing for his club, he continued to keep having faith with the players like Glenn Whelan. I remember James McCarthy was breaking through at Wigan and eventually got his debut with Everton, and he still remained almost loyal to Glenn Whelan. Now that annoyed me as an Irish fan, but I can see what you're saying there about Trapattoni and Conte linking in, and as you said, being his mentor.
Yeah, I mean, Trapattoni was the guy who signed Conte, and he's the guy who gave Conte his debut. I mean, there was a time where Conte, he played really badly. I think it was his debut game in a friendly against Bayern, and he was depressed, and he thought of he's not going to be there at Juventus the next year. But then Trapattoni comes walking the next day, and he advises him, you're the future of the club, so you have to stay here and you have to think positive. And that's something that Conte instills in his players too, that even though they lose, they must know how to respond. I mean, look, it's a league that's decided over 38 games. You're not going to have every game going your way. So you have to be in a situation that's going to prepare you to deal with circumstances better, like whether you're losing or you concede quicker than the opponents, or if it's a debatable decision or things are not going your way, or or everything. That's something that Conte learned, from Trapattoni, and he's trying to forego his legacy.
That's interesting what you just said. Tom, would you concur that basically that's where Arsenal have gone wrong for the last decade? Because when you consider the fact Chelsea have slightly dipped off over recent years, United have slightly dipped off over recent years, Liverpool have been thereabouts and up and down, and City have only come on in the last few years. Arsenal are the one team out of the top 5 or 6 that have remained in the top 2. What Arjun is saying is that a good manager basically combats a difficult situation. Surely that's not what Wenger does.
No, I mean, you look at what Conte has done, and he's almost a situational manager, and he takes situations, and it might sound counterproductive in a way, but he also plans for the future in some senses. Whereas Wenger, his focus, certainly for the past 10 years, has been to play the best football, because you kind of get the feeling that he used to think, well, if you play the best football and you play the best looking football, surely you're going to win something.
But he doesn't play the best football anymore. And he didn't play the best football for the last 5 years, because Swansea play better football than him in the last 5 years, and they've won nearly the same amount. In fact, Arsenal have only won one more trophy. Man City have played great football over the last 4 years, and even Liverpool, they mightn't have been very successful, but under Brendan Rodgers and Klopp, they are quite a nice team to watch. But surely that doesn't mean anything in the long run. Well, I think I'd rather the old Mourinho way when he was at Chelsea of 1-0, win the league. Who gets the legacy, him or Wenger?
Exactly. Because at the end of this season, like, provided things stay as it is and Chelsea don't slip up, who's going to win the league? The one that won the most points, obviously. Possession doesn't mean anything. How well you play and how pretty it looks doesn't mean anything. So, what I don't think Wenger has installed into Arsenal, or this new crop of Arsenal, is win first, play well later.
Exactly. Look, guys, I'll come back to Wenger in a while. I'm just going to move on. We'll have a chat later on about Wenger and Arsenal TV in particular. I'm figuring all the hype around it at the moment. I'm going to move on to Liverpool and Hull. Sam, did you see the highlights of the game, or if you did, what do you make of the new Hull under Marco Silva?
Well, I watched them. I've seen extended highlights of that game, and I've watched a couple of their other matches since he's been there, and he's been absolutely brilliant. So far, they were pretty unlucky not to win at Stamford Bridge. They were that good. And the way they completely did a job on Liverpool. Liverpool got kind of suckered into how they would have done under Rodgers. That's what was frustrating, was it's very similar. But Marco Silva's basically done everything right so far. And I thought the fact that he had to sell his best player and they now look a better team shows what management can do, really. One manager is worth far more if he's allowed to build a squad that he wants.
Especially if he's a good manager, because rewind, it's 4 or 5 years ago nearly now, there was Mike Phelan got, obviously with Hull, Mike Phelan got the job and it was a nice romantic story, whatever. But as I was saying, rewind 5 years ago, you had Nigel Atkins who brought Southampton up, a nice romantic story, things doing okay, and then all of a sudden he got sacked. And his unknown came in and everybody had a meltdown saying English football's in the dogs and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Who's laughing now? Where's Pochettino now? Surely this is a similar case to what Marco Silva is doing at Hull.
Definitely. I think it's the same sort of thing. It makes the Paul Merson and Phil Thompson stuff look kind of, to be honest. I mean, it's laughable, but at the same time, it's laced with a bit of xenophobic tendency as well, isn't it, between the two of them? It's basically they don't like the idea of foreigners coming into the game and want to give it to guys who are bomb. They had the same thing with Paul Clement. They criticised that as well.
That's right.
Although it's not a foreigner, they said it should go to a championship manager. And he's done brilliantly at Swansea too.
I have to concur with that, and again, Marco Silva's another talking point. But Tom, do you feel that Liverpool's poor finishing, or was it a Silva masterclass, if you like, tactically, that outdone Liverpool?
I think it's a bit of both, to be fair. I think Liverpool, in recent games, have not been firing. Even in the Cup against Wolves and in the EFL Cup against Southampton, they just couldn't find the back of the net. At the same time, a good manager or someone that knows what they're doing, i.e. Marco Silva, has probably looked at them games and he's thought, right, How do you beat Liverpool? Where you sit back, you soak up the pressure, eventually they're just going to keep bombing players forward, and then one move and one ball up, this time from Ranocchia, and you're in. And that's what happened. So he cleverly worked out how to do it, mixed with the fact that Liverpool couldn't finish their dinner this weekend.
Arjun, he mentioned there about especially the ball from Ranocchia that played in the ass. This is the same player that couldn't even find a training session at Everton in the first team. He was that bad. Do you feel that player managers like Marco Silva are a revelation to the English Premier League?
I think his record speaks for itself. He's picked up 7 out of the last 12 points. So, I mean, that's outstanding considering that Hull aren't exactly a team that's fighting for major honours or Europe. So, I think he's done an extraordinary job. And the thing that appeals a lot about Hull is, especially under Silva, is that they're very organised. Now, this is something that comes after maybe 3 or 4 months, but they've got this sort of a chemistry to fight for each other, to stay in certain positions defensively and offensively, which gives them an advantage. And
balance.
They've been able to do this in hardly a month, and that's amazing.
Liverpool have won one game in 9 since the turn of the year. That was against Plymouth. It was away, wasn't it? It was away. They've lost games away to Hull, home to Swansea. These are teams that are nowhere near the capability of Liverpool. Sam, do you feel that's Liverpool's? I don't know if you ever even believed that they were, but do you feel that that's Liverpool's title chances gone, and now do you feel that they're a threat for, not even a threat? They're unlikely now to get top 4.
Yeah, their title chances are gone. I really believed in Liverpool in the first half of the season, and I seem to make the same mistake with them most seasons, thinking they're going to be more than they become. But they looked so dangerous. The first few weeks of the season, or the first couple of months really, they looked better than anyone. And I didn't see them collapsing quite this much, to be honest. But I think they're now, unless they turn it around in the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks, they're probably not going to get top 4. You're looking at the Manchester clubs suddenly look more likely to get top 4 than Liverpool and Arsenal.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting, actually, especially when you consider that Arsenal 3 weeks ago, or not even before this game, in fact, were considered Chelsea's biggest title rivals. Now, personally, I find that quite hilarious, figuring Arsenal's record of choking down the years, especially come February, March time. Tom, what about you feel about Liverpool's well, maybe not even their title chances, their top 4 chances? Do you think now they're in a real fight, and do you think they could really miss out?
Completely agree with what Sam said. At the start of the season, I looked at Liverpool and thought, maybe they could. They've got a less amount of fixtures. No European football can help them. Klopp can, keep the fitness up of.
Yeah.
He famously wants to keep his players fit and keep on going. And of course, no European football. It's only 3 competitions, and one of them's done by March. So the back end of the season, the business end of the season, he's got the whole period to work with. I didn't expect them to collapse this easily so early on, and given the way that Man City are looking now, they look a completely different side. Manchester United, unbeaten since I think it was October or something, albeit they're still 6th.
To be honest, I think the 4 of us could remain unbeaten if we were playing teams in the middle of Armenia and things like that, so I'm not going to give them too much credit for that.
No, but when you look at they're unbeaten, it's for X amount of games, and Liverpool, they're only winning 1 win in 9, I think you said. And
yeah.
Plymouth.
Yeah.
So I think it's the manner of the defeats as well. It's they've been. I used the Wolves game for example. That was ridiculously easy from that first set piece. Richard Seaman was free at the back post and he just nods it in. 1-0 after a minute, and already they're on the back foot in front of their own fans. So I think, unless things pick up quickly, they could be in trouble.
The other thing about Klopp is that his teams, they usually want to play at 200 kilometers per hour every game, and that's not feasible over 38 games. And I think we have seen similar characteristics even with Dortmund, where they start off very, very nicely early on, but then they fade towards the end of the season. When other teams, they start slowly, and when the season gets tougher, they start performing. I think Klopp needs to find a plan B for his methods, because he can't play every game at 200 kilometers per hour and out battle each of his opponents and play at a higher intensity. That's not feasible.
I'm going to come back to Klopp just before we close the show. I want to particularly mention Jurgen Klopp at the end because it's something that's quite bugging me. And I briefly had a chat with the two guys just before we came on air, and it's definitely something I want to talk about because it's really, really starting to annoy me. I'm going to move on from the Liverpool-Hull game because I think we've spoken enough about that. I'm going to talk about Sunday's clash at the Etihad. It was Man City against Swansea. It was Guardiola against Clement. Arjun, we all know that you're quite a romantic when it comes to Pep Guardiola. Do you see a change in recent weeks in the City side?
I do. I think that Jesus, he's given Man City another dimension. Not only can he take his chances, but he's also able to put his team in very good positions. I don't know what's happened with Aguero this season or in the past 1 year, but he's been declining at a rapid rate, and it's something that's really astounding. But I think
I have to disagree with his decline. I don't think that it's a decline at all because I still think Aguero's within the top 4, maybe even 3 strikers in the world, out and out strikers in the world. I do think that this is Guardiola's system. I'm not saying Guardiola should change his system to suit Aguero or vice versa. However, I don't agree that Guardiola's Sergio Aguero's potential or ability has declined whatsoever, because it hasn't. He's still the one thing I would say is he seems to got a little bit more selfish.
The thing is, what I've noticed with Aguero is that he seems a lot different compared to the past. Whether it's his body of frame, like whether it's his touch or his like the way he moves and his drive, it's just different this season, or maybe in the past 6 or 8 months. I don't know why that is. Maybe you're right, it's probably the system that's limiting him. But still, there are certain things that he does where he touches the ball and it's maybe 3 or 4 yards ahead of him, and that's something he's got to improve on. I still think that he and Jesus can both play together really, really well. So maybe, that's something that's going to intimidate other teams. So
I have to agree. I agree there, and again, I'm not shying away from the subject. That's something I'm going to talk about at the end, along with Klopp. Sam, do you see a different change in the City side, in particular the front three?
Yeah, it's evident Aguero doesn't quite fit in with how they're playing, and the one of you mentioned about him being greedier.
Yeah,
I think that's just a side effect of a striker under pressure. If you look at any striker when they come on, they're always, and particularly when there's been talk about their future, or if the manager's not keen on them or whatever. Look at Sturridge this season. He's always quite greedy to start with, but when he's been given a chance by Liverpool, he's been shooting almost all the time. And Aguero's been a bit like that, but I'm not sure about the Aguero and Jesus together, because I think City have just got too many attacking talents that he's going to want to play De Bruyne, Sterling and Sane as well. So it's an option, but I think Aguero will probably leave in the summer. I'm not too sure where, maybe Real.
I personally don't see that happening, but again, I'll come back to that. Tom, did you see the highlights of the game, and basically in particular, what do you make of Jesus' contribution throughout the 90 minutes?
I saw a little bit of the highlights because I didn't manage to catch the full game on television, but he looks like he's added a lot more to the team. They look a lot more confident knowing that they've got obviously, I'm not saying Aguero's not a goal scorer, but if you're going to put someone on the end of the box, Gabriel Jesus looks like he's going to get on the end of it, especially with Sane and Sterling flying next to him. I think I don't know what's going on at Man City, because they look like a completely rejuvenated side, and all they've done is added one player. Now, I think Aguero will stay. I don't see, one, why Guardiola would want to sell him. Two, why the club feel, just because they've got Jesus, they think Aguero's gone. He's past it. He's over the hill. It just doesn't add up to me.
Guardiola has spoken quite specifically in the past about the whole now Jesus is in and Aguero's gone. That's not going to happen. The City City see themselves as their competition as teams like Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Barcelona. They don't see themselves alongside the likes of Hull, Swansea, and say Middlesbrough. And that's no disrespect. So when they bring in the 19-year-old to try and replace the 28-year-old, who's as I believe, I personally think he's within the top 4 strikers in the world. They're not going to do that. They're not going to bring in and put all their hopes and faith into a 19-year-old and then pack Aguero off and see where it goes. I just don't see City as a brand selling Aguero, especially when you consider, one, what he's done for the club, two, he still has all the potential in the world. He hasn't gone full Fernando Torres just yet. But it's just very difficult to comprehend. Would I put it past Pep? No. Would I put it past the club? Yeah. I just don't see the club doing that. I don't see. I even don't even see Aguero wanting to leave, because all the talk that keeps coming out about Aguero leaving is not coming from him. It's always, he keeps referring back to, it's what the club will want to do in the summer. The club will want to keep him. Pep might.
What do you think's going to happen with Iheanacho as a result?
I don't know, to be quite honest. Iheanacho for me is a Daniel Sturridge-esque finisher. I think the kid is incredible for what he does, but he is limited in what he does. There was talk today coming out from reports in Nigeria who have followed him pretty closely, or maybe they have contacts with his entourage, that he's been seen nowhere near the side in recent weeks, and that's following his refusal to sign up with Pep's brother Pierre Guardiola as his agent. So I don't know if that's going to come into it, but Iheanacho is definitely more limited than both Aguero and Jesus, but he could even be argued as a better finisher than the pair, but we know that Guardiola wants more from his side.
Yeah, I think he's the one who's least likely to fit into a Pep side. But that in itself, I think that would be a bit of a failure from City to have to sell him. No, failure is not quite the right word.
No, I would agree. I would call it a failure. Because if you have a kid of that potential, they lost that with Sturridge. What was it, 9 years ago now, and I can see why they lost that with Sturridge. Sturridge was 18 years old and the man had 60 grand a week. That was before that was a different time, you know. So, but I think losing another star young player like Iheanacho is a bit of a disaster, and also you got a massive marketing area in Nigeria because of him, because he's ultimately the next big star. Arjun, we've seen again on Sunday, Caballero was put in goal instead of Claudio Bravo. What do you make of it? Do you admire Pep for that? Do you think shouldn't need admiration for it? What do you make of the whole Caballero coming in instead of Bravo?
It's a brave decision, because first of all he opted to give away Hart and to bring in Bravo, and Bravo hasn't quite adapted well to the Premier League. But I think in the last 2 games, the goalkeeping choice was perfect, because I think the goalkeeper he's bailed City out a couple of times. And but what the thing with Pep's philosophy is, he wants to play from the back. So he wants a goalkeeper who's good on the ball and who can cover for his defense when the defense presses higher. And that's something that I don't know if this is a long-term perspective, but I think that maybe Donnarumma could be a good addition if you guys can manage to sign him, because this cannot be a long-term plan for you, whether it's Bravo or Caballero.
Well, Caballero is out of contract in the summer.
Yeah.
Well, Tom,
this is something that's a makeshift, right? It's just for the past. It's just going to be for 1 or 2 months. So.
I certainly think so. Tom, do you feel that Guardiola should be admired for at least, and he basically did when he admitted he was wrong by dropping Bravo, because he didn't just drop him now for 1 game. This is 2 league games, so it's 3 games in all actually if you include the FA Cup. Do you think that takes admiration to do, or should you admire him for doing that? I should say.
I think I admire him because I admire him for making the change in the first place. because he stuck to his principles and he tried something that he was comfortable with. You know, there's other people saying Joe Hart is one of the best goalkeepers in the world, what are you doing chopping him? And immediately they're on his back. He stuck by his guns and he kept with Bravo, despite the fact he had nightmare after nightmare after nightmare of practically every game he played. And then by putting Caballero in, it's like I said, he admitted he was wrong, and it's worked well for him. So I admire him for both, for bringing him in, for trying, but also for dropping and admitting he'd been a mistake and adapting to what was going on.
It's interesting that I do feel that the defence, especially for whatever reason, John Stones has looked a hell of a lot more comfortable with Caballero behind him than Claudio Bravo, and also with Stones as well, he's become a lot more aggressive. Sam, I'm going to just move on to Swansea just for a couple of moments, and after covering Chelsea for a few years, you know a lot about Paul Clement. How do you feel he's adapting to the Premier League, and two, what do you make of his tactics on Sunday?
I think he did pretty much all he could do. It worked relatively well, and I think he's been a great appointment, and I'm glad to see that he's been given the chance. I hope he keeps Swansea up, particularly after the people who criticised him. But I thought against City, naturally everyone was saying how they felt sorry for Swansea after the game, but it's like, well, what did you expect to happen? It was sort of eventually they would have been very lucky to get a 1-1, wouldn't they? And in the second half, they tried a bit more. But there's only so much you can do when you've got that big a mismatch in ability on the pitch. You don't have that much of a chance to do. When City are playing like that, and with that amount of attacking talent on, because basically what Guardiola did was, other than Aguero, he put on all of his creative players, and it was just, it could have been embarrassing on another day, but it went okay in the end, didn't it?
Well, I think so anyway. Arjun, what do you make of the almost, I'm not going to say revelation because he's shown his potential before. What do you make of this almost renaissance of Leroy Sané, especially considering he started the season with a lot of injuries and fans were starting to question, even myself included. I was even starting to wonder whether he had the ability, but I didn't think I thought it was going to turn out like a Jerome Boateng, where he was going to leave at the end of the season and become a star elsewhere. What do you make of him in the City side over the past month?
I think it's just about adapting. Like initially, he needed time to adapt to the culture of England, both from a footballing perspective and otherwise, and he also needed to adapt to Pep's methods. So he took time, and I think after he did adapt, after he adapted physically to Pep's game, and like he's been improving a lot. He has a lot of potential. I think we all know about his natural quality. He has a lot of pace, and he's really good on the ball. And in the past 1 month, he's showing a different side to his game. But I think he can do a lot more. He can be more consistent and more ruthless, because that's something that he needs to be.
Tom, do you feel that there's been a more improved player in the last month than Leroy Sané?
Definitely. I remember when he signed in the summer, my first thought was City have got a superstar on their hands. It's just a case of whether it's a case of too much too soon. And he didn't adapt straight away. And it's not necessarily a criticism, because at such a young age to change a culture in football and a culture in style, moving from Schalke to a Pep Guardiola Man City, where there's a lot of pressure on you to essentially win the league. I think he got injured. It was a pretty bad injury, and he just seems to come back from that a different player. I think consistency, as Arjun said, and a bit more ruthlessness, and he's probably one of, if not the best wing-wide player in the league, maybe. And that might sound a bit bold, but
I don't think so. I think I fully agree with that, and I think anyone that would argue, I know you got your Hazards and you got your Sanchez's, but they're not out and out direct wingers. He's left-footed, he's playing on the left-hand side. It's quite rare nowadays that you're actually seeing those type of wingers attack players. Normally the players like Hazard and Sanchez playing on the left, cutting inside into the right-hand side, getting a shot away or making space. But he's playing left, he's left-footed, he's so direct. He's absolutely so direct. I was at the London Stadium last Wednesday, and he absolutely destroyed West Ham. I know he didn't score, and I know he wasn't even named man of the match. The kid was absolutely incredible. He tore the team apart, and he did the same to Arsenal last month. I was a little bit more sporadically where it wasn't like for the entire 90 minutes, but that's the time. I think that was the game that really was the catalyst for him to kick on and go forward, especially figuring he scored his first goal. Sam, what do you make of City as one title contenders again, and also two top four chances?
Top four now looking very good. Title, maybe is between them and Tottenham to finish second. I think. I can't see anyone catching Chelsea from here on unless something ridiculous happens.
Newcastle 95-esque capitulation.
Yeah. So I think it would take a team to win pretty much all of their remaining games, and I think City are most likely to do that. But I just can't see it. City next year and United. I thought City and United would fight for the title this year, but I think next year will basically between those two. I think City will be very, very strong next year.
I think by saying that, and I think that could be another show itself. But I think by saying that you're giving Chelsea quite an injustice there, because Chelsea do have a lot of finances, and I have a feeling Costa might go. I could be wrong, but they're not going to let Costa go and just bring in somebody like Solomon Rondon to replace him. They're going to bring in somebody like Griezmann or even Lukaku.
I think Morata is another player.
Even Morata, that's absolutely perfect. Yeah, I have to agree. I don't want to get bogged down on next season's title chances. I'm going to move on to, you mentioned there about United and how they've been improved and so on and so forth. Arjun, this game against Leicester was a bit odd. I don't know why. It just was a bit of a weird atmosphere around the place. For starters, I think United should have been down to 10 men before they scored their first goal. Do you think Juan Mata's challenge on, was it Jamie Vardy, was a red card?
Yeah, it was. It was a red card. It was dangerous. I think even Mata came out and he said that he was lucky to be on the pitch, and that he didn't intend to be malicious or something. But it was a sending off.
I don't think players go out being malicious, but it doesn't. It
was a sending off.
He could have been trying to tickle him with his toes, but at the same time, it's still a red card, surely.
It was a sending off.
It was a sending off. I have to agree, Tom. Players like Mata stay on the pitch. Not only does he go on and score, okay, the game is probably over before he scored a third goal, but it's also got United with 11 men. They've got their tactics in shape. Do you feel that with that? First of all, do you feel that it was a red card, and also do you feel that the game possibly could have changed in the balance of that?
Well, firstly, Stonewall red card. Studs were up. It was over the ball. I can't find the defence as to why it wasn't a red card. A second to...
Maybe because it was United.
It's because it's Mata. I think it's because it's Mata.
One of those. It's the reputation of the player.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's when it happens that quickly, it's wrong and it shouldn't happen, which is why I'm very pro technology. But I think Mata gets away with that because they think that he slipped, or that they don't think it's as bad as it looked. Maybe they didn't see it properly.
Okay, okay. Now you're mentioning that. Okay, well, yeah, it was Vardy, but now you're mentioning that about reputation. Yeah. Why I think it was the same with Drogba 10 years ago. When he was legitimately fouled, he was never believed because of the size of him or whatever. He used to hit the deck. However, I'm going to go back one game, and I'm going to go back to United, to City and Swansea. I'm going to mention Raheem Sterling going through on goal, avoiding a challenge by Fabianski. Should have been given a penalty. Didn't appeal for the penalty, but was still given a yellow card for diving. And that goes down to reputation. How does a player who doesn't appeal a penalty still get booked despite not appealing it, and then a player like Mata goes in 2 foot, studs high, potential leg breaker, gets away with it?
That's part of it. It's just an individual thing again, isn't it? It's the same way that if Ramirez makes that Mata tackle, we would have got sent off. And if it's a different striker, if that's Peter Crouch running through on goal like Sterling was and falls over, he won't get a card. There's a good chance he doesn't anyway.
But it's wrong, yeah?
Yeah, of course it's wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, it's completely wrong, and I think if referees, they may well admit that sometimes, well, they might not admit it publicly, but that sometimes they will go on who it was. If it's Diego Costa that does something that looks dodgy, there's a good chance it is dodgy.
Well, I'm gonna have to agree with that, but it's again we're gonna go slightly a little bit off the topic, but surely that when managers come out and criticize themselves, sure. Imagine the amount of respect a referee would come out. I always remember, it was Paul Durkin. It was about 13 years ago. It was United and Newcastle. First of all, Newcastle should have had a penalty, and secondly, United had a goal disallowed, which shouldn't have happened. He came out and faced the cameras afterwards, and then I think actually a few years later it was either Mike Dean or Mike Riley. It was Fulham and Chelsea. And it was Drogba had a goal disallowed for a handball, which was handball. The fourth official didn't see it, but both those times those referees came out and confronted the cameras, and both those times they were done nothing but applauded. They admitted their mistake. Surely something like this should start coming into the game. Arjun, what do you think?
I mean, these decisions are done on they're very quick, so they're done on a real time basis. So while it's very hard, for them to. I mean, it's their job at the end of the day. So I think it's only fair that fans get their point of view as to why they did something like that. And I think they should come out and speak to the press about why did they decide like. I think the thing is, this happens in Italy where they confront the referee and the referee gives his point of view on why he gave a certain decision. I don't know why it doesn't happen in England that often enough.
It doesn't have to happen after every occasion, every time Costa hits the deck, and whether it was a penalty or not. But big decisions like this matter. Red card, famously as well. It's the one that just popped into my head. But Aguero's elbow on Winston Reid. Now I don't care who you are or what you say. Andre Mariner was the referee that day, and he saw that challenge. He saw that header. He wasn't. He was staring blankly at it. He, instead of turning around and saying he didn't see it and he got it wrong, he turned around and said he did see it and get it wrong, and Aguero couldn't have been banned. He turned around and said he didn't see it, so that means Aguero went and got 3 games. Now it was an elbow, I'm not disputing that, but at the end of the day, referees should be coming out and stating that, yeah, I seen it, yeah, I didn't. But this was wrong, I was right, I feel I was right in this occasion, I still stand by I'm right, I think I was wrong. Like, surely, not only fans deserve it, players deserve it as well. They're not idiots.
But I think that's the problem with the system. So Mariner, in that case, like you say, maybe he was forced. Aguero deserved a ban for that.
Agreed.
Mariner got it wrong at the time and should have maybe explained afterwards. But because of this ridiculous rule, where if the referee says he's seen it, you can't have retrospective action. If you get rid of that, you get rid of a lot of the problems. If the referee sees it and says to the FA, "I got that wrong, sorry," and then the FA can act on it. We've had other stuff. There's been loads of stuff over the last few years where someone's got a yellow card. It clearly should have been red, but they can't get it changed to a suspension because the referee said he saw it.
But it also should happen with things like diving and Sterling's yellow card on Sunday as well. That's not alright. It might sound daft, but that's probably not going to hamper City's season too much. But say he did pick up the 5 yellow cards, and on the time he did get suspended, they were playing Chelsea or they were playing Spurs in a title contending match.
Yeah.
City lose that. Surely you have an argument for things like that. I'm not saying that every yellow card. Maybe clubs be given two appeals a season for things like yellow cards and whatever. I think any more than 2 is a bit ridiculous because you'd have appeals flying in left, right, and centre. But it was just his studs are flying in. He could, and all that. I don't like Jamie Vardy, but he could have gone in and broken his bloody leg.
Yeah. It was an ugly tackle, wasn't it, basically? The fact the referee got it wrong is a problem with the standards of refereeing. And I'll try not to mention the technology again, but they're the sort of decisions where I bet the referee, if he was allowed to watch a video of that, he would have done. And then he would have given a red card. Because there's no way if you get a proper view of that, you don't give a red card. It's a red card all day.
Absolutely. Guys, we're going to move on to the goals. Mkhitaryan up at the scoring. Tom, do you see a massive difference in not only this United side with Mkhitaryan in it, but also the form of Mkhitaryan himself?
Yeah, I mean, he was a fantastic player in Germany with Dortmund, and it was surprising to me why he didn't hit the ground running immediately, or at least why he wasn't being played. And whatever reason that was, it's down to Mourinho and United and his team. But I remember so well. It was one of the most memorable performances of the season for me, for all the wrong reasons. The first Manchester derby when Mkhitaryan got absolutely battered
by Alexander Kolarov.
Yeah, there you go. That sums it up in itself. No disrespect to Kolarov.
So. No, there should be, because he's City fans themselves will tell you he'd survive a nuclear war, that fellow, because how he survived 7 years at this at the club after.
Just for the odd free kick he scores, it's worth it.
But it's about three. He's only scored about 3 of them. I always say 3 things you're guaranteed in life is death, taxes, and a Kolarov shot every single match from 45 yards out that goes a mile over the bar.
I love it. It makes my highlights seeing Kolarov smash it over the bar.
Every single game, and it doesn't matter where he's playing, centre back, left wing, left back. You could play in bloody net. I guarantee he'll have a shot from the halfway line nearly.
One absolute hero, just magnificent.
Although I will say that him as a centre back has worked quite well. He's been pretty much faultless as a centre back in Guardiola's system.
Yeah.
The silence says it all. Anyway, guys, I have to admit, United were quite good on Saturday. The goals they tore Leicester apart. Leicester becoming a bit of a worry, and for the football romantics, Arjun in particular, I know you are, so don't even try to deny it. This Leicester team is seriously struggling.
I think they're favourites to go down at the moment.
I would concur with that.
I agree, yeah.
Arjun, what do you feel is their biggest problem so far? Well, not so far, even just in recent weeks, especially the United game.
Lack of quality.
Quality?
I just don't think that the summer window, it was that good. Like, when you won the league, and I mean, you've got a lot of money, I think that you have to recruit better players of better quality. We all know, that they're not going to put up another title challenge or maybe even qualify for Europe. But you at least want to guarantee a certain void that was left, when Kante departed. But I don't know. It's just like they've not been able. They lack a lot of player quality, and that's something that Ranieri has to figure a way out on how to get them through the line now.
I'm going to come back to that because I couldn't disagree with more of anything you just said there. I'm going to come back to that at the end because we're going to discuss Claudio Ranieri's vote of confidence from Leicester today. People are going to think I'm probably harsh on it, but I'm going to go into it because I saved stuff on my phone for this topic and I'm not letting it pass. Leicester at the moment, Sam, where do you think the biggest flaw is, or what do you think has changed the most? Do you think it's just Kante, or do you think it's a lot more?
It's not just Kante. It's easy because it's very fun for BBC and Sky to post things of look at Kante's record since being in the Premier League. Yeah, Kante's really very, very good, but it's not quite that simple. He enabled our Leicester players last year, but I think Riyad Mahrez is just. I mean, what's happened? Like, he was astonishing last year. He was as good as anyone. His decline, obviously Vardy, but no one really thought Vardy was going to be that good again. Some of it's to do with Kante protecting him, but I think a lot of it is a kind of we can't do last season again. So they just look a bit disinterested at times.
But you look at players like Christian Fuchs. Christian Fuchs was destroyed on Sunday. This is a player who's come into the Premier League, and in fairness, he probably left Schalke to come into the Premier League with Leicester in the hope of getting the bigger move to someone like Everton or someone in around the 6-7 positions like United. But he looks completely uninterested in his career. He thinks he was arguably the league's best left back last season, and now he's complete. Yeah. So
to be fair to him, on Sunday, Mata and Mkhitaryan were wonderful. I mean, they would have torn quite a few fullbacks apart, but I think it is a bit of that. I mean, like someone mentioned the atmosphere earlier, I think, at the King Power. And everyone there is a bit like, well, so we're now going to maybe avoid relegation. It's kind of hard to get excited about anything after that, isn't it, really? After last season, of course.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be this club sole focus. Tom, do you think Leicester are going down?
At this moment in time, yes. Because for two factors. Sunday's performance was really where people's heads started to turn and take it seriously. But their performances of late have just been poor and uninterested, whereas their rivals, Sunderland go to Palace and win 4-0. Swansea have been on a good run of form and they look a different team, as do Hull. Yet Leicester are a shadow of themselves, and I think it's a mix of where do they go from after last season. They reached the ultimate peak when no one expected it to, and it doesn't get any better than that.
Okay,
however, certain players have not turned up at all, and the manager himself, poor summer recruitment, and just hasn't changed anything.
You mentioned it's very hard. Why would he change something that was so successful last season? See, I find it difficult to see why he changed formation or changed his style of play when he's got the nucleus of the team he had last season. But in saying that, you're saying there about the players aren't showing up and they lack quality. Are you telling me they don't have more quality than somebody like Hull?
At this moment in time, no, clearly not, because they're not. They're not putting in the performances that obviously not won them the league.
But they have better players.
I mean, it's also a case of certain players overachieving last season. Maybe this is the real quality, and maybe last season they just overachieved. I think that Ranieri perhaps is more inclined to being loyal to his players and giving a chance to those that won him the league. I mean, we can't be overcritical of him, but they had 2 windows to sort out their mess, and they haven't been able to do it. They lack a lot of quality. That's not enough for them to stay in the Premier League.
But Sam, surely that they possess a lot of quality as well.
I think it's interesting the point you made about Hull, because if you go man for man, it's not that different based on anything this season. I mean, last season was just an outlier. It looks like a complete freak, really.
See, I don't know. This Leicester team, I do think is good enough for. I'm not saying to win the league again. I can't even explain how they did, but how they can be a point above the relegation zone, have the second least amount of wins this season. Chelsea were bad defending champions last year. Blackburn were in '95, but and okay, both those teams were a lot better than this Leicester team. But surely Leicester are better than teams like Hull. They have more quality than teams like Swansea. Who else have you got? Even Burnley. Come on.
Burnley's a different one. Burnley, possibly, that's about Dyche and the way they're set up. I think they are a bit short on quality as well. But I'm not sure about that. The guys who were real quality last year was mainly Mahrez, who produced sort of moments of magic that win you games. And Kante obviously was a star. But, I mean, the fact Slimani hasn't really had a run in the side because he's been injured or then he's away at Afcon. But other than that, you look at the teams like, Danny Simpson, Robert Huth, Wes Morgan.
Yeah.
Not surprised they're getting it.
But even Jamie Vardy, and I don't look what he did last season and whatever people think of him or whatever. But Jamie Vardy scored 5 goals in, was it 25? No, sorry, it was 33 Premier League games before last season. He's okay. He's got the record of most consecutive goals in Premier League history and blah 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 whatever. Fantastic for him, something he can take to his grave. And he was playing long league football for not many people who know, or I'm sure everybody knows. We've heard it all for the last year, but that's his level. He's not good enough. He's not good enough for England. He showed that in the Euros. I do agree with what you're saying that they do lack quality, but they don't lack. I don't think that they lack the quality to be where they are or struggling so desperately the way they are.
I think at this moment in time, before we move on, I just want to make this little point. Hull and Swansea, the change of managers, that's one aspect of it, but they look like teams now. Whereas before they looked like they were just plodding along. Hull in particular, that Snodgrass might get a goal. They weren't relying on Mbakani or Hernandez to bang him in. Whereas now, with the good recruitment, good basic training, both teams look more adept and more capable of surviving because they've got the basics right. Until Leicester start the simple things, and I think you mentioned Vardy. His is a confidence issue at the moment. Because he showed against Man City, on the right day and with the right service, and if he's in the right mental frame, he can score goals.
That was against Manchester City's defence at its worst as well. But yeah. I agree with what you're saying. I think that Hull and Swansea, I think at least one of them will be safe now, and they both look doomed just before Christmas. They both look inept. Like, Swansea were conceding at least 2 goals a game. Hull, I agree with what you said about Hull. Hull looked like a team kind of trying not to get embarrassed. And then maybe Snodgrass will get us a win, but they were never going to stay up like that. And Leicester looked the worst of the lot. I mean, even after Palace's performance at the weekend, I think Leicester look at the most danger of going down.
Okay, guys, I'm going to ask just to finish off on this game that occurred. I'll ask all three of you. I'll start with you, Tom. Tom, Leicester going down?
Put me on the spot with this one. Yes.
Sam?
Yeah.
Arjun?
I agree, yeah.
Okay. Also, United's top 4 chances. In the one-word answer again, straight through. Tom?
Nope.
Yeah.
I don't think so. It's very uncertain.
And I do think so, to be quite honest. Okay, we spoke a bit there about the relegation battle. I'm going to run through just 2-3 more games just to completely recap on the weekend review. I'm going to start in South London, and I think this is quite possibly one of the weirdest, if not the weirdest result all season. It was Crystal Palace 0, Sunderland 4. Sam, surely not even you in all your knowledge could have expected this.
No. Literally every prediction that I do, I had Crystal Palace to win and win by a couple of goals. I don't really know how it happened, and I think Allardyce is probably under pressure again now, isn't he?
Do you feel that he's lost that a little bit of invincibility he had because of what happened with England?
Potentially. I don't know. I also think that as much as Pardew, he has this tendency for his teams to just collapse for 6 months. Palace were not. They seem to have got a lot worse under Allardyce somehow. They had that win was it against Bournemouth?
Bournemouth last Wednesday, yeah.
So I thought they might have turned a corner then, and then this result, it was like it looked set up for them to then beat Sunderland, and then they sort of go on a little run and they'd be safe. But they look after that, I don't really know how they're going to come back from this. They've got to recover straight away, or you think they're probably gone, and Allardyce's career would so very sadly be coming to an end.
You say sadly. Tom, do you agree with sadly if Allardyce was to leave the Premier League?
I'm trying to put it in the nicest possible way.
It's difficult, isn't it?
That was the nicest way I could put that I would quite like to leave, really.
I wouldn't be against him leaving. Let's put it that way. I wasn't too pleased when he was England manager, and I was a little bit more happy than I should have been when he got sacked. But he has somehow made an Alan Pardew relegation-threatened team worse, and I cannot wrap my head around it. The only explanation I can find is that his ego has been dashed so much by what happened at England that he can't even do what he made his name on. When he was appointed manager of Crystal Palace, I can assure anybody, the majority of people would have gone, they're safe. They've got Big Sam, they're safe. And they've regressed, minus that Bournemouth win. And if every game had 0-0 or a solid Big Sam 1-0 written all over it, it was at home to Sunderland.
It was something nice about the team that he left to go to the big time at England, beating him 4-0 at home. That was quite a nice moment. I liked it a lot.
So you're not fond of Big Sam then?
No. I thought the way that he got humiliated as England manager was kind of amusing in the end. I thought the criticism of the way it was done was sort of tedious, and he was a bit of an idiot for getting caught quite so simplistically with his pint of wine.
Arjun, again, as the guy said, nobody could have predicted this result. The squad Crystal Palace have, when you consider it, like, as we just spoke about Leicester, Palace don't lack quality. They've Scott Dan at the back. They have James McCarthy. They have a good midfield. James McCarthy, Johan Kabay, even Wilfred Zaha's drastically improved, and up top they've, for me, one of the top 10 best strikers in the league in Christian Benteke. Do you fear for this Crystal Palace side, especially considering what happened on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, this was the shock of the weekend. perhaps maybe even the worst prediction possible could have been 1-0 or 2-0 to maybe Sunderland, but 4-0, that's humiliating.
4-0 at half time.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know how they're going to wrap their head around this and recover, because this is going to be a tough moment for them to endure.
Okay, guys, I don't really want to speak too much about Palace and Sunderland, I think, because we still have a small bit more to get through. Do we fancy either of these teams to go down?
I can see either going down. It's just a case of who's worse.
Sam?
Yeah, I think that now that Hull and Swansea have turned into something resembling football teams, there's a chance that they both go down now. I think there's a decent chance it'll be those two and Leicester maybe.
And what about you, Arjun? Do you feel that Palace's quality can pull them through, or do you feel Sunderland are doom and gloom because without Jermaine Defoe they're nothing, or do you think they're both screwed?
I mean, we know this about Sunderland, that they're somehow going to miraculously escape relegation. So, I mean, Palace, perhaps, maybe they. I think it's likely that they're gonna go down.
Okay, guys, just moving on to Everton and Bournemouth. It'll probably be the last game that we recap this weekend. It was definitely the game of the weekend with 9 goals, and I have 3 questions on this particular topic. Arjun, there's a lot of links with Lukaku to Juventus. Do you feel, if he's scored 4 goals now again on Sunday, and he's kicked off 2017 in quite some style, do you feel that he's better than Everton? Maybe I would say better than Everton, because I do think that his potential is better than where he should be. Do you feel that he can move on this summer and progress to an even bigger club?
I honestly didn't expect Juventus to trigger the 90 million release clause on Higuain and sign him. So I hope that we could sign Lukaku to replace Morata in the summer. But it was just like astonishing that Morata just decided to spend 90 million on Higuain. The thing with Lukaku is he's not consistent, and that's something that he merits criticism for. And I honestly don't think that he's grown an awful lot from where he was in the last year. I mean, of course, he's going to score like 3 or 4 goals in such games, and then he's going to go maybe 3 or 4 more games without a goal. He needs to find a balance in terms of consistency, and I think he needs to make better numbers. And he can improve a lot more, but I don't think he's going to improve if he's going to stay at Everton. And I don't see Juventus trying to sign him this summer, unless, of course, if Dybala leaves, and I don't see Dybala leaving. So I think it's highly unlikely that Lukaku joins Juventus.
Sam, do you see him going back to Chelsea, potentially replacing Diego Costa? Figuring on performances such as Bournemouth, but on the contrary, he also has only scored 5 goals in 30 games against the top 4.
I think it's the sort of thing Chelsea would do. But I completely agree with what Arjun said, is that's the thing that remains for Lukaku, is he's great for that. He will have a few games a season where he wins you a match on his own, and he's unplayable when he's like that. But then I also saw him at the Bet365 midweek, and he did nothing. Literally, he got the ball, tried to turn the defender. Shawcross sort of pushed him in the back a couple of times, as Shawcross does. And he didn't get much change, and just didn't offer a great deal. He too often goes 5 or 6 games without scoring, and then getting a load in one game is often sort of unnecessary. Getting 2 innings is usually enough.
I have a very close friend who's an Everton fan, and he's Everton fan for the last, I think, it's 54 years. So I'm not that old, but there's he is a lot more elderly than I am. But he once described to me, I am, and I still am quite, I wouldn't say pro Lukaku, but I quite like Lukaku. And I remember saying to him that, Lukaku's wonderful and can become this, that and the other, and I would like him to move on to a bigger club. And he said if a bigger club came in and offered him a large amount of money, he'd drive him to wherever he wanted to go. He says that, yeah, he's good, and it's exactly what you two guys just said. He said he's good. But he said when you fire the ball up to him, you might as well be kicking it off the wall because you know it's going to bounce back. His first touch is horrendous.
It's become a cliche about Lukaku now, but it's completely fair. He still doesn't have the build-up play to do what even Costa does a lot of the time, and Costa's isn't perfect. Costa still miscontrols the ball a bit too often.
Yeah.
And like his record against the big clubs is, well, awful. Like he's just not good enough to go. So for the amount Everton would want, I can't see him leaving this summer. He'd have to have another season where he proves he can win in the big games as well.
He's got quite a good agent in Mino Raiola, so that's whether if he left, I wouldn't be surprised. But as you said, the fee Everton are going to command from is going to be quite hefty.
We're looking at 70, aren't we? Probably 70, 75 million.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's pretty ludicrous, especially when you have players like Dybala at Juve for you get for similar value. And I know who I'd prefer in my team. Tom, I'm going to throw this one out to you because at the start of the season there was a lot of questions about whether this man could replace Arsene Wenger at Arsenal. I always knew personally that this was another English manager being built up to be something he's not. But Eddie Howe at the moment has led his Bournemouth side to concede 19 goals in 6 games. I read there a while ago. How can you justify that, especially with a Bournemouth side which does have a good squad?
You mentioned there about Eddie Howe being oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
About Eddie Howe being linked to the Arsenal job. When I think it was halfway through last season, I said to a couple of my friends, I don't know why, and I was going completely on gut feeling, but he felt like he would be the next Arsenal manager. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And I've never been a fan of him, of Eddie Howe in general, but he's always seemed to escape criticism despite he's 19 goals in 6 games.
Yeah.
That is outrageous. Of how I don't know how I can't get my words out.
You can't go away to teams like Everton, score 3 goals when teams like Man City and Arsenal have scored a goal between them, score 3 goals and then end up chucking the whole thing away by conceding 6. Like it's ludicrous, and I do think Howe is avoiding criticism simply because of his passport.
And because he is, I think he's the blue-eyed wonder from these shores. But he, again, if that was someone, I don't know, let's put a name out there, Marco Silva. If he had done that, they'd be calling for his head. He'd more or less be out the door. But because Eddie Howe smiles and winks and, he seems like the friendly the PE teacher that occasionally teaches geography sometimes, he gets away with it.
See, I agree. I think Eddie Howe, I've defended him quite a lot, but he gets away with stuff. It's the same way that Allardyce has got away with things with his teams before. There's a general trend to just not want to criticise the British managers because they're getting their chance and they're taking their chance. Well, either way, Bournemouth are shipping goals at a ridiculous rate, and if they do that next season, they will go down. There's no question about it.
Well, I wrote at the start of the season saying Bournemouth owe everything to Eddie Howe. I agree with slightly what you're saying, or with in fact the vast majority of what you're saying, but I still do believe that wherever that Bournemouth's rise in the last 4 or 5 seasons is all down to Eddie Howe. Don't know what he did or how the hell he managed it, but it is incredible.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that the fact he's avoiding criticism reminds me very, very much of when Harry Redknapp was in charge of Spurs, and before that at Portsmouth. He was a media darling. Eddie Howe and somebody else we're going to talk about in a few minutes is very, very similar. How to keep making the same mistakes that Wenger gets criticised for on a weekly basis, that the knives are sharpened on a weekly basis for Guardiola, and even Mourinho as well. And okay, Mourinho almost like picks his battles, and he famously forgets things like the Mata red card and whatever, but Howe deserves criticism in my opinion, and I think the fact he's avoiding it is only down to the fact he's probably going to be the next England manager, which sums up the state of English football internationally. Okay. Anybody else got anything to say on that?
Nope.
Right, guys, I'm going to move on. I'm going to have just a quick chat about this week's talking points. Now, we went into some discussion there a couple of minutes ago about Leicester and the United game. Arjun, you stated that Leicester were quite poor in the transfer market this season. Okay. Um, can you justify to me how a manager who has spent the best part of £74 million kept the majority of his first team squad bar one player, let alone spend another 45 million on forwards, is in 16th place, is not as won the second least amount of games all season. Current defending champions comes out today and gets a vote of confidence.
I mean that's basically Ranieri. At the end of the day, the thing with Ranieri is he has such moments, where he either overachieves something a lot or he underachieves it to another extent. I mean, we've seen this throughout his career, whether he was at Fiorentina or whether he was at Juventus or Roma. It's the same thing with him. And but the main problem was the player recruiting. I think they should have opted for players within the Premier League, but they went on spending ludicrous amount of money on players from outside the Premier League. And
Okay, I'm just gonna hold you there. I'm just gonna list off some of these players and some of the transfer fees. Islam Samani, £29.7 million from Sporting Lisbon. Ahmed Musa, 15 million from CSK Moscow. Nepalese Mendy, 13 million from Nancy. Ron Robert Zieler, 2.6 million from Hanover. These are players surely that are all capable in the Premier League, and in fact, I would personally consider Zieler a better goalkeeper than Shamaika. I would consider Musa better than Mark Albrighton, and I would consider Islam Samani better than Okazaki. Yeah, he's struggling so badly. He's the defending champions. Okay, they may not be the team everybody wants to go out and beat like what happens normally with defending champions. But surely how can the club come out and give a manager a vote of confidence? I don't care if he won the league last season. What's more important, the romanticism that he won the league or the fact that they stay up? Sam, am I being overcritical or do you agree?
There's the romanticism around it is frustrating, but in this instance, I would usually completely reject it, but I do understand it in this instance because it's completely unique. It was such a ridiculous thing that happened last season. It is very hard for him to forget it, but I agree with you that he shouldn't be free from criticism. Like, this team they are still the champions. He should find a way to get them at least halfway to the performances from last season. The problem with Slimani has been good on occasion when he's played, and he's started 11 times and scored 5, but then he was one and he's had knocks and all sorts. I don't really know what he could do, if I'm honest. And the vote of confidence sort of seems a bit unnecessary. If it was that big a concern, then we can not say anything. I think it would be better for him.
Tom, I'm really struggling with this one because, especially when clubs nowadays, the loss of relegation is colossal. Especially in England, it's enormous. The financial loss that they suffer. Is it because he simply says dilly ding dilly dong to the media that he's avoiding this criticism?
I think he won the league with Leicester City. That shouldn't excuse him from criticism, but God, if there's ever a reason not to be criticised. I mean, the player recruitment was, on paper, they should be adept to, Slimani's a better player and a better goal scorer than Okazaki. You're spot on with that. However, there's just not something there. How many players do you reckon he went in for that may have subconsciously thought, well, maybe it's Leicester, it's a one-off thing? I think that was at the back of some players' minds, that if they try to sign someone...
Should he be sacked?
Yes. If they've got someone lined up, yes.
Wow, that's quite brave. And I would agree. I personally would agree. And I think, from what I see online, there's a lot of division between Leicester fans, whether it's almost a Ranieri in or a Ranieri out. It's building up slowly now to the Wenger thing. It's just it probably won't go on 10 years. But, Arjun, do you think that throw sentiment aside, do you think Leicester should throw sentiment aside and sack him?
I think he he's probably earned his chance for the next maybe 3 or 4 months. But if these performances continue for another maybe a month or a month and a half, it's gonna be too hard for them to survive. And if they go down, there's no assurance on when they're gonna get back up.
Exactly.
We know this is a result-oriented business. So, I mean, Ranieri is a nice guy, but I mean, nice guys don't survive in this business for long.
So is my dad, but he shouldn't be manager of Leicester City.
Exactly. And I mean, that's the thing with Ranieri. I mean, he's the sort of a guy, who hits unbelievable highs. He took a Juventus that just got promoted into Serie A, and he went to the Bernabeu and beat them. But then in the same season, he went like, I think maybe 3 or 4 losses, and we got out of the Champions League. And I mean, that's a typical Ranieri for you.
Sam,
I genuinely don't think that he merits to stay in the job. If this was any other club, he'd be out. But
he would be out, especially if they spend so much money as well. If this was any of the top clubs spending this sort of money 5 or 6 years ago, they would have been out. It's as simple as that. But you look at Ranieri now. Last year Benitez came into Newcastle with 10 games to go. Benitez would have kept them up. I think 1 more game, 2 more games tops. Newcastle would have stayed up. Do you think Leicester need to sack him now if they're going to sack him, instead of this whole 2 months down the line, give him another chance because he's Ranieri and he won the league? He won the league, and look, this is me from the outside looking in, and I know it could be very hard, especially for Leicester fans and also people involved in Leicester. But do you think that they need to be ruthless now and make the change, get somebody in, because it's an attractive job, a big stadium, a lot of money. I think they've good players. Do you think that now should be the time they're going to sack him?
No. I think, well, if they had a perfect if they had Rafa Benitez lined up to take it, maybe.
Roberto Mancini.
I'm not sure he'd take it. I know he wants to go back to England.
On Mancini, yesterday's report in Italy, they've linked him to the job at AC Milan. So I'm not quite sure about Mancini.
He's also been linked to West Ham in recent weeks. I know that's kind of been fueled by the fact he was there last Wednesday to see City and West Ham, but I personally think Mancini at West Ham is perfect. I think that West Ham are ambitious, maybe a little bit too ambitious, but he could work wonders there. And I think that we were talking about Big Sam earlier in Crystal Palace. I think Crystal Palace made a mistake in not going for Mancini for starters. Okay. I'm going to move on to another manager under pressure, and there's been a lot of talk this week about Wenger, and it's come from Arsenal TV. Tom, is it finally time to make to cut ties with Wenger? Do you think now should be the time? I know the club aren't going to sack him, but do you think now should be the time for him to not sign that new contract? And if so, who would you like to see, or who do you think we may see in the hot seat?
I think this past week for Arsenal has been the first time, maybe in 2 years, that I've realistically thought he won't be there next season. Because you hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, this should be his last year," but there was always the redeeming factor that, "Oh, but he did this. Oh, but he won the FA Cup. Oh, but he finished second." This is the first year where I think he's genuinely in trouble for losing his job. I think he should go, regardless of what happens, whether they finish out the top 4 or in the top 4, or pull off a miracle and win the league, or one step further win the Champions League. But I can't see a way of him staying.
Who do you want in?
From a personal point of view, I want him to stay. But
who do you think should come in?
Laurent Blanc seems like a fit for me.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Sam, what about you? Do you think somebody like Blanc is going to come in and mastermind an Arsenal victory to a league title?
I think a lot of other managers would at least get Arsenal very close. I think what has been the excuse, and it's either been Wenger's fault or someone else's fault, is they've not bought a centre-back, they've not bought a defensive midfielder, and they've not got that extra striker. This summer they got Mustafi, Perez and Xhaka.
Yeah.
And whether they were the right signings or not, they were the signings they've needed, and the signings I've said they've needed for years. I think Arsenal have a very good squad, and they have depth now, and they're out of the title race at the start of February. But there's no way they're going to win the league now. It's just not going to happen. and they've been humiliated. They could have been thrashed in the first half by Watford in midweek. They were that bad.
And saying whatever about Watford, Chelsea didn't get out of first gear in the whole 90 minutes. It was so easy for Chelsea.
Stroll in the park.
Although Arsenal could have maybe scored through an Ozil shot, and if Gabriel could head the ball properly. But Chelsea, genuinely, if they were on fire like they were against Everton, would have properly thrashed them.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
could have been 6 or 7. It was they didn't pick up Hazard, and when they did get near him, he just knocked them over like he did to Coquelin. And then Costa was bullying their central defenders again. It was just kind of silly. Costa wasn't even very good. Like, their striker had a bad game, and Chelsea still got 3.
Yeah, Arjun, mainly the talk in England has been about Allegri taking over at the Emirates, more so than probably anyone else. From your insight from the Italian end, do you see something like that occurring?
It's very unlikely. I don't think that Juventus make rash decisions, and I don't see a reason why Allegri could leave. Maybe the only thing is that he can't motivate the players more. But his methods, they are very sustainable. But ultimately, it all depends on where Juventus are in April or May. But even then, like if, suppose we somehow miraculously don't win the league, I think he's done enough to cement his place to keep his job, and especially considering that the rebranding is going on, I don't think Juventus would want to let go of him. Unless, of course, Diego Simeone is available and Juventus are inclined on getting him. But I just don't see it happening.
And I really don't see Simeone at Arsenal. It's just not a suit. It's like
And yeah, that's the other thing. Like, I just don't think Allegri would suit Arsenal that well, because his methods are result oriented, and it's not going to entertain you. If you're okay with seeing your team suffer a lot but somehow get a win, that's fine. But that's the thing. That's why he suits Juventus really well, because at the end of the day, we just care about winning. But I'm not sure if the Premier League would appreciate such a manager. Especially, the thing is, he's going to be under huge pressure to deliver, and if he doesn't deliver, he's going to get sacked, because he's not going to play a style that's going to be too aesthetic on the eye.
I think personally, whatever manager comes in and replaces Wenger is going to fail, because it's going to be similar to and I don't care how good they are, it's going to be similar to David Moyes at United. They're replacing basically a legacy, and he's always going to be that manager is always going to be compared. It's only Mourinho now at United, 3 managers down the line, that's finally not being compared to Ferguson in comparison to David Moyes and Van Gaal.
He's still sick though.
I'm going to slightly stay on Arsenal. I just want to slightly mention this. I don't go into any detail really with it. Alexis Sanchez has today announced that he's going to decide his future at the end of the season. To me, that just stinks that I'm leaving by, and I don't want to talk about it right now. Sam, what you make of it, that comment?
I think there's a good chance. A lot of the talk's about he wants to know what Wenger's doing, isn't it? I think that's another reason Wenger's got to make his future clear. Is Arsenal's, 2 of their 3 or 4 best players, as in Ozil and Sanchez, are waiting on what he's doing to decide, and they want to know who's going to succeed him.
Do you see Sanchez staying if Wenger stays?
Maybe, probably. I think there's a very good chance he will leave anyway. If he's as much as a winner as everyone professes him to be, then I think he should leave for his, because you saw his reaction when he was playing the other day. He's just sick of it. He looked more annoyed than anyone. He looked more, and I don't blame him, because he's carried that team at periods.
He's carried it all season. Let's face it. Of all the big names that are in the squad, he's the one that constantly delivers. And for whatever reason, fairness, Giroud, it's not his fault. It's not his fault that he keeps getting dropped out and whatever. However, when Arsenal refusing to give a player like Alexis Sanchez, I'm not saying let him fleece the club. He's not asking to be. He's not fleecing the club. He wants money for what he's putting in. He's putting in a lot more than he's getting paid. And when you have a player like Mesut Ozil, who's basically demanding the same amount of money, it doesn't add up. He's nowhere. He's not even fit to wipe his boots. Ozil's great against teams like Hull at home when you're 3-0 up and he scores a brilliant loopy header. Gee, like it doesn't work out. Sanchez has destroyed Man City in the last 2 seasons. He destroyed Arsenal in September. You know, they're games that Arsenal need to win titles. Not a third goal against Stoke with a loopy header and he's great and because he passes sideways, Arsenal fans go nuts. It doesn't work out like that. I don't care what his name is or what country he's from or who he played for beforehand. It just doesn't work out. I would pay Sanchez what he wants within reason. Ozil, I would put a contract down in front of him and I put it down onto a similar basis as to what City do with the players like De Bruyne and players like Silva, where it comes down you get your basic and it comes down to assists, win bonus, goals, etc. Because he does not produce in big games. I don't care what anyone says.
I mean, it also depends on the coach, right? Because, like, I see Ozil with what he's doing with Germany or what he did at Real Madrid, and he used to be a big game player for Madrid, and he's a big game player for Germany. But I don't know what happens to him with Arsenal.
So did Fernando Torres.
I mean, maybe it's just the coach who's not giving the best out of him. I think it's just that.
Okay, guys.
Of course, Ozil deserves blame, but still.
I'm going to move on from Arsenal because I want to wrap things up in the next 5 minutes or so. I'm going to talk about Jurgen Klopp. Jurgen Klopp, for me, is basically the media darling of the Premier League and what he can basically walk on water. The fact the manager went up to an assistant manager last week, screamed in his face, and was turned around and told, "It's okay, I like your passion," got away with it and then escaped the ban. Where only a match before, and Arsene Wenger pushed to the fourth official, deservedly got 4 games, but yet Jurgen Klopp gets away with it. When are we going to start criticising Jurgen Klopp? Sam?
About 2 weeks ago. I think that crossed the line by a long way. I can't believe there was no retrospective action for that one. I think Wenger's ban should have been longer. If they want to push that you have to respect the officials, then even 4 games is it 4 games in the stands?
Yeah.
That's not enough either. I mean, it might make a bit of a difference, but he should get something more significant for actually pushing an official, and Klopp should get something nearly as bad for what he was.
Right, but Tom, when you look at Klopp's even decisions, right? This is his 3rd window now at Liverpool. He continues to play Emre Can, who can't find any bit of form in recent weeks. He refused almost point blank to buy a left back, and he decided to play James Milner at left back. Like, why is nobody starting to criticise him? Why is he getting away with it? Is it because he makes his players run really fast and Liverpool look like they care?
Because he smiles and laughs in press conferences. I can't say any more than that.
He's played 54 Premier League games and he's the exact same record: 24 wins, 12 draws and 14 defeats. I think, don't hold me to that, but it's the exact. I know for a fact it's the exact same record as Brendan Rodgers. Arjun, surely this should be the time now that he is criticised, especially considering they've won 1 game in 2017. That was against Plymouth in the FA Cup.
Yeah, he should be. I mean, if you look at the end of the day, when you're evaluating managers, it's just about growth, whether they've been able to develop the side compared to the predecessors. I don't think Klopp's developed Liverpool an awful lot compared to what Rodgers did, and that's the main thing that determines a person's job. And
people will argue that Rodgers had Suarez on his side. People will argue that he had an attacking 3 of Suarez, Sturridge, and Sterling. And okay, yeah, that's fine. But Rodgers still overachieved. Rodgers still was able to get his defence in midfield was far worse than what Klopp has now. Klopp is renowned for getting to finals and choking. He's done it so many times, but it's still Conte who was under pressure in the summer. It's still Guardiola. And even Mourinho, because of the finances he spent. But why? Because Klopp spends 36 million on Mane all of a sudden, then. It's brilliant for Liverpool, and I can't remember when Liverpool signed the player and all of a sudden it was a bad move. But I remember when Kevin De Bruyne moved to the Etihad, Paul Merson couldn't understand how he was going to get in the team instead of Jesus Navas.
Well, Paul Merson not being able to understand something is not rare.
It's probably a positive if he can't understand it.
But people did criticise the Mane deal for a bit. But I agree, they didn't criticise it that heavily, considering that this was a guy who only seemed to score goals just before a transfer window, and they paid an awful lot of money for him. Yeah. But it has turned out to be a pretty good signing.
I agree, I absolutely agree with that, but he's still neglected key areas. Emre Can is consistently failing to produce top level performances. James Milner's been played at left back. Fine, if James Milner can play at left back, that's fine. But you can't go a season with a natural right winger that's where he started his career, playing at left back, and then avoid it in the January transfer window. You got players like Jonas Hector going, Jose Gaya at Valencia. These are players you can get for 20 million quid, and you could. They are phenomenal talents.
Going back onto I think the two biggest issues was the left back and the central midfield. The left back, he's kind of got away with it in a sense because James Milner isn't doing too bad. It's not the best of. It's like you gave some names there that you could use, but I don't see how you can play a high press game with Emre Can as one of your midfielders. I have seen glue quicker than that man. It's unreal.
Okay, guys, I've just a couple of questions just to throw at you, and I'm going to be finished now. It is 60 seconds roundup. I have a question here that came in from Pakar. Which three teams are going down? Tom, I'm going to start with you, then Sam, then Arjun. Throw your three teams out to me.
Sunderland, Crystal Palace, Leicester.
Sam.
Sunderland, Crystal Palace, Leicester.
Arjun.
I'd hope it's Sunderland, Crystal Palace, Leicester.
I'm going to say Sunderland. I'm going to say Middlesbrough, and I'm going to say Leicester. We also here's another one from Anupam. He's asking, again same order, can Eden Hazard win Ballon d'Or? Tom.
No.
Sam.
In theory, yes.
And Arjun.
Not until Messi and Ronaldo are still playing.
I think the fact Eden Hazard and Ballon d'Or in the same sentence just don't go hand in hand. I'm sorry. And this one's from Chin Mei. He's asking who's going to win the Golden Boot. I'm going to throw that one out to you, Tom.
You know what? Harry Kane.
Sam.
Yeah, Harry Kane.
Arjun.
Yeah, I think Kane is best equipped to win it.
I fully agree with all three of you on that one. I don't see Kane being stopped. I see he's the only one that seems to be scoring regularly for Spurs as well, and that's another reason why I think the Spurs are going to slightly fall off again at the end of the season. Guys, you've been brilliant. It's been fun. I hope you enjoyed the first Sportskeeda football show. To our viewers, we'll also be recording again next week, and hopefully some of the guys will be back involved. From me, Shane Burns, from Tom, Sam and Arjun, thank you all for listening. We're just going to wrap it up now. Don't forget to like and share also. Thank you and good night.